The last laptop I reviewed is probably the cheapest 2-in-1 in existence. It's too small and too slow to properly handle any modern task thrown its way, but now it's time to examine the same concept with competent components at a reasonable budget.
Slap Tech.
This, then, is the Lenovo IdeaPad 5 2-in-1. It normally retails for about $850, and it comes with everything that every laptop user can ever need. This includes the AMD Ryzen 780M HS CPU with 8 cores, 16 threads, clocked up to 5.1 GHz, and 16 megs of cache. Plus AI cores, yay! A Ryzen 5 variant is also available. The surprisingly useful integrated AMD Radeon 780M takes care of the graphics side of things. There's 16 gigs of soldered DDR5X memory to cache programs, a 1TB NVMe SSD to store files, all underneath a 14-inch IPS 1200p touchscreen. A color-accurate OLED touchscreen version is also available. Powering it all is a 57 watt-hour battery, and it weighs a reasonable 3.5 pounds. The AC adapter is a tiny 65-watt unit with 9 feet of cord length out of the box. With a longer from-the-wall cord, it can be upgraded to 12 feet, and a battery charge threshold of 80% is, while not configurable, available to be set. When not on the plug, this IdeaPad knows how to conserve the watts that go to the CPU. Thus, despite being an average-sized battery, it still lasts for a generous 10 hours and 45 minutes of internet work use and 8 hours and 30 minutes of streaming video. Curiously, doing fun things drains the battery sooner than expected, and tasks like 2D retro games will use up the battery in 4 hours, Citra only lasts for 2 hours and 30 minutes, and PC gaming will deplete the battery in 1 hour and 30 minutes. Yes, that's with battery saver on, which, thankfully, doesn't detract from the gaming experience on this laptop, but certainly doesn't help much with its longevity. The build quality of this IdeaPad is undeniably good, but not great. It's wrapped in aluminum all the way around, and the body is slow to show signs of use, like on the palm rest and back of the screen. The keyboard, however, will smudge up very quickly and isn't afraid to show it, since the finish on the keys is quite reflective. The lower body can be easily bent with a little force, but the touchscreen is very firm and takes a heavy hand to flex. Let's see what all those holes in the side do. On the right is the most annoying power button placement in all of history, microSD card reader, and 2 USB-A 3.2 Gen 1 ports. On the left is the HDMI 1.4B port, 2 USB-C 3.2 that can both take a jolt and use DisplayPort 1.4, and a hole for a headset. One of the USB-A ports can house the included pen in its holder, and with the microSD card reader, I can't say that anything is missing. I wish the HDMI port was a 2.1, and I don't want to admit how many times I've mistakenly pressed the power button when handling this laptop. 4 T5 screws hold the bottom cover on, so if you want to peek at what's underneath, some special equipment might need to be acquired. Inside we see that the NVMe SSD is tiny, a 2242 drive instead of the standard 2280, so don't go buying a larger SSD until you absolutely know what to look for. In other news, the RAM is soldered and can't be upgraded, the Wi-Fi card can be swapped out, and the speakers are mounted on the very edges, promising maximum stereo separation. The cooling solution for the CPU is rather unique, with a thick boy heat pipe alongside a companion pipe, all feeding heat to a single fan that exhausts into the display. It's clear here that there was room for another port of some kind, but I guess Lenovo decided there was already enough, and honestly, yeah, there is, but a third USB-A port on the other side of the laptop would call for an alleluia. The keyboard in this IdeaPad is fine, but could easily be better. The simplest improvement to make would be the keycap finish. It's too shiny, and direct overhead light obscures the key labels. Other than that, the action is firm and clicky with a soft treble noise. Silence isn't the name of the game, and key presses don't always register after the point of actuation. That being said, missed strokes isn't a huge issue, and typing up the script wasn't a frustrating experience in the slightest. There aren't any dedicated home and end keys, which always drives me crazy, but there's a function lock and every other obligatory hotkey for a Windows device except a touchpad toggle. The keyboard backlight has 2 stops and isn't overbearing. It's a fine keyboard and gets the job done, but it feels a little cheap and is not what I would expect to see on an $800+ laptop. And stop putting the stupid reflective finish on keycaps. This is the second time I've seen it and it's dumb. So just stop it. The touchpad works. It's huge, doesn't get in the way while typing, and is predictably accurate. Gestures work fine and the right click is reliable. I wish there was a hotkey for it. Instead, the user must fish for the function M combination. And in case you were wondering, flipping the screen past halfway disables the keyboard and touchpad. Speaking of the screen, it also just works. This IPS version has a prismatic glossy surface, go figure it's a touchscreen, and respectably thin bezels on the top and sides. The bottom bezel is a thick boy and doesn't match the others, so bezel nerds beware. In other news, 300 nits of brightness is plenty and gets dark enough for a pitch black room. Don't expect to use it outdoors except on a gloomy day, just cloudy probably won't cut it. The colors are only 45% accurate on the DCI-P3 scale, so super fancy photo and video work is out of the question. The ghosting is average for laptops, nothing impressive at all, and not incredibly annoying either, same as the latency. It's good enough to enjoy games of all kinds and only disappoints when paid extra attention to. The colors are neutral out of the box, nothing pops out, and might be described as slightly dull, and the workable viewing angles are very wide. The most annoying part of it is that the hinges will let the screen fall on a nervously twitching lap. Otherwise, there's virtually no wobble while typing on a flat surface. Since it's a touchscreen, Lenovo was kind enough to package a pen with the laptop. It's not bad until you press down with it, where there's too much friction to feel like a natural writing or drawing tool. I would highly recommend you replace it immediately with this bamboo pen, which is linked in the description below. The speakers on this IdeaPad are underwhelming for this price segment. They don't fill the room at full volume and have a serious problem with mids and bass tones. While it doesn't exactly sound like an old radio, the tinniness is a letdown. Overall, they're barely tolerable, and you should just be glad they make noise that's not too heavy in the mids or treble spectrum. Buy headphones.
Sword and shield now, pull up your pills. I'll help you find that courage you'll never lose. Safe and slow. You're the only one who can go safe and slow. Go safe and slow.
This is a test of the webcam on the Lenovo IdeaPad 5 1080p. This is in excellent lighting. I do look a touch overblown and the colors are a little washed out. As you can see here behind me, there's not a lot of detail in this curtain. The whole picture just looks a little bit fuzzier than it should be. For comparison's sake, here's 1080p on the Asus ZenBook 14. This is a little bit closer to what you might expect from an older front-facing camera on a cell phone. And there's a little bit more detail that you can see in this curtain behind me. And here's a test of the webcam in poor lighting with my oven fan on to test the noise reduction of the microphone. I'm speaking in a normal tone of voice to see if you can still understand what I'm saying. And for comparison's sake, here's the Asus ZenBook 14 in the same very poor lighting conditions with the oven fan on. Again, I'm speaking in a normal tone of voice to see how well this webcam cancels out the ambient noise. System performance of this IdeaPad is top-notch, not only because it's fast, but because it can also be quiet, cool, and maintain its comprehensively stout capabilities in power-efficient modes. The Ryzen 78045HS still drinks up to 17 watts in the most power-sipping profile, which nets over 9,000 points in Cinebench R23. That's enough for short-form 4K video editing in battery saver. Long-form 4K video editing will be a pain with only 16 gigs of soldered memory. While working on non-3D graphical projects in performance mode, the fan noise won't get out of line. It'll spin sometimes, but will wind down sooner rather than later, and never gets uncomfortably loud. When under full load during project exports or compiles, it throttles the 45-watt CPU down to 32 watts and radiates a good amount of heat. Under maximum duress, the CPU will stabilize at 90 degrees, burning through unprotected laps, bed sheets, and small pets. All the while, the fan noise will never be a bother. If ever working on regular office stuff and the fans kick in, go ahead and press Function Q to toggle through the performance modes until the battery saver mode is in play. In this mode, you'll never notice the fan. On to gaming. Sure, there's no dedicated GPU in here, nor is there any dedicated VRAM, but the integrated Radeon 780M still does stuff. I wouldn't trust it to play the latest games, but games from a couple years ago should play alright in low details and reduced resolutions, while even older games will be very playable in medium. There will always be stuttering here and there in 3D games, but those who aren't picky about that sort of thing will get the most enjoyment. AMD lets users set aside as much system memory as they can stand, up to 8 gigs in some laptops, but this IdeaPad only lets you set aside up to 2, which is the default. Does it really make a difference that 4 isn't an option? Maybe. As far as the aesthetic experience is concerned, the display isn't a disappointment. There is ghosting, but nothing intolerable, and I don't feel an annoying amount of input lag. The fan noise is perfectly acceptable and easily drowned out by even these speakers that struggle to fill a room. Speaking of the speakers, their frequency response is just fine for gaming, the real disappointment being the lack of output. Expect to game on full volume or use headphones. As for the heat factor, always wear protection when gaming on your lap. When gaming on battery power, expect only minor hits to performance, which may or may not be perceptible. This laptop is a very capable retro gaming machine. It has all it needs performance-wise to play games in Dolphin, Citra, and older while in battery saver. Sure, there is more stuttering in the most complex 3D games, but not that much more than PCs with dedicated VRAM. Colors don't pop in retro games but fit well enough, the ghosting and input lag are noticeable but won't frustrate at all, and the battery life is a letdown compared to the competition equipped with Core Ultra CPUs, but overall, it's fine and won't let you down. For the bottom line, is it worth paying more than $800 for? I would expect greater creature comforts for this price, at least a better keyboard and louder speakers. However, this IdeaPad has been known to drop to around $650, at which point it's very much worth it. Use headphones, deal with the keyboard, get a better pen if you plan on doing fun pen things, and everything will be great. Is this IdeaPad good enough to be my mobile daily driver? It's reasonably priced when on sale, and the 2-in-1 touchscreen is extremely attractive. The only thing that really pecks at my brain is how much better the Asus ZenBook 14 is with the Core Ultra 7. It's not a 2-in-1, and it's generally costlier, but more than makes up for it in every other aspect with noticeably less weight, OLED touchscreen, quality speakers, and much better keyboard and longer battery life. In conclusion, students get 1 9/10 of a thumbs up. I can't give it a full 2 because of the MSRP. It also has an average keyboard, not a great one, and there are lighter things out there to take to class. Otherwise, the battery life is great for non-game applications, and it does sport a low profile in the grand scheme of things. And you get to tease your classmates with MacBook Pros by flipping your screen all the way around and taking terribly sloppy notes because you forgot how to set up and learn how to use OneNote before an impromptu show-off session. Don't worry, I was there first, and it'll all work out in the end. Casual gamers will get a great sense of enjoyment if your preferred gaming library is a little bit older, and especially if it's retro. It has enough power to best most handhelds and is much more comfortable to use. In fact, if debating between buying a handheld and a cheap laptop for office use or only this laptop, I would recommend getting only this laptop. Competitive gamers should move on. Don't be fooled by its parlor tricks and the opportunity to animate P tags instead of drawing a single JPEG with a mouse. Can we all be grown-ups about this? Please? Moment of silence for recovering from that joke, and desktop replacement users will bemoan the lack of upgradable memory and limited storage expansion options. Obviously, the easiest way to expand the storage is to get a 1TB microSD card, but forget your dream of a 4TB NVMe SSD because of the smaller size. You're SOL there, buddy. Home users will definitely love this if acquired while on sale. It's easy to carry around the house, except for the hellishly annoying power button placement, has a slightly more than decent screen, and great battery life. The only negative mark to consider are the weak speakers. If the 2-in-1 aspect isn't a must-have, then yeah, you can keep shopping. This has been a review of the Lenovo IdeaPad 5 2-in-1 here on SlapTech. Leave a like and ask any question about this laptop in the comments section below. I've got a couple more reviews in the pipeline already, so go ahead and subscribe so you don't miss them. Thanks for watching, and you guys, have a good night.